Attraction can be a little tricky to understand, but being attracted to a friend's parent could sound outworldly. People who did it with their friends' parents, how did it go down? Before we start, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. Her daughter dumped me for a guy she didn't like. I was completely heartbroken. When she found out that I wasn't doing well, she called me to her home to help me deal with the breakup. I didn't think much of it because I knew her for years, and she's always been nice. She always used to give me compliments, and I always seen her happy to have me date her daughter. We met up, we talked, and everything was fine. She said I can stop by anytime again if I did need someone to talk to. At the time, I had some issues with my family, and I wouldn't be home as much either. Then onwards, I would occasionally go over to talk and eat something. She was in her 40s, very thin, but had a very nice face and was always very nice to me. I was always very complimentary to her and thankful for her helping me out. She was helping me without her daughter's knowledge as well. One day, a hug goodbye got really long. She wouldn't let go, but she wasn't doing anything else, just hanging on very tight. Being young and because of our relationship, I was on instantly. I guess she felt it and moved closer. I guess her husband didn't really pay attention to her. We went at it for a few hours as the house was empty. She must have been pent up. It was honestly surreal. It didn't set in for a few days. My ex and my friends were all intertwined. I couldn't tell anyone and never have. Happened a few more times until I had my life in order, and it seemed like she was starting to regret cheating on her husband. She would only let me finish inside, which blew my mind, as I had been constantly pulling out of her daughter for fear of the obvious. It definitely made being dumped by my first girlfriend a lot easier to deal with. Your rebound is your ex's mom? I mean, yeah, that would definitely make any breakup much easier to handle. Talk about helping to deal with the breakup. Sounds more like, great, my turn. Story 2. I was 23 and she was 44. Her son and I were friends and in college together. She was 5 feet 2 inches, slim, really cute, and originally from the Dominican Republic. She had always flirted with me, but I thought that was all it was, until I realized I was mistaken. On New Year's Eve, a group of us went out for dinner, and she joined us. We had a great time and ended up back at her house. After her son and his girlfriend went to bed, she asked me to sit beside her by the fireplace. She leaned her head on my shoulder, looked up at me, and asked, "Do you want to?" I couldn't say yes fast enough. We dated for 2.5 years, and as a bonus, I learned a good bit of Spanish from her. Story 3. When I was 20, my friend's mom could get us into a bar owned by her friend. Every week, my 3 friends and I would go, and she would buy all our drinks and be over all of us. One night, after her son went to bed early, I decided to go for it when we got back to the house. She was attractive for a mom, but a dead fish in bed, so it felt really underwhelming to say the least. The next morning, she made me breakfast, gave me a quick blow, and then took me home before her son woke up. To this day, I think my friend knows, but we never talk about it. Story 4. So he wasn't really a friend per se. In my mid-20s, I used to buy weed from him. He was around 20 and lived with his mom, who was in her late 40s. One time I swung by and he was just heading out. His mom asked if I wanted to drive her to the bar. It turned out she had already had a few drinks and had a breathalyzer in her car. I realized I was probably going to end up in a situation I didn't plan for. Anyway, it was a fun night, but I never went back after that. Story 5. I did it with an ex-girlfriend's mom. She broke up with me, and a couple of weeks later, I ran into her mom at the grocery store. She mentioned that she missed having me around, and I replied that I missed her too. She was a pretty great mom. We chatted about her recent divorce, her sister moving in, and shared some light conversation as we strolled through the aisles. I helped her put her groceries in her car, and she hugged me. She told me I should come over sometime and see her new paintings. She was an artist. I went over a week or so later and she served me some wine and basically enticed me and introduced me to play role at the same time. We did it. My God, it was so hot. I was with my ex for about 5 months while I was with her mom for over a year. Her daughter didn't know for the first 3 to 4 months or so, but then she found out. That was amusing to me. We saw each other for over a year, and then she moved. I miss her sometimes. The roleplay aspect definitely becomes more unusual when you think about the fact that you were set to become her actual son-in-law. Is it good weird or bad weird? That's probably a question for the historians to figure out. Story 6. A friend of mine slept with my sister and kept making a big deal about it. I honestly could have cared less. and his mom was always making offhand improper comments when I was around her, so I decided to go for it. She wasn't old and still looked pretty good. I came through one day knowing he wasn't there, after flirting with her pretty hard for a few weeks, and she almost immediately jumped my bones. We slept together for a while after, and neither of us ever said a word about it. It was fun while it lasted, and I didn't stay friends with the guy for other reasons. But anytime he mentioned that he slept with my sister, I had the satisfaction of knowing his mom was extremely into ATM and did it like a champion. Story 7. Not a friend, but a bully. He bullied me for being queer, so I did his dad. I made damn sure he could hear me doing his dad. The bullying stopped. His parents were already heading for a divorce, and I just pushed them closer to it. Now they are separated, and he is married to a nice man. Story 8. I feel really lucky to have had a positive experience. I knew I wanted her from the moment I laid eyes on her, which happens to a lot of people. I'm sure you've spotted someone on the street and imagined what it would be like to connect with them. For months, I didn't say or do anything about it until I playfully invited her to catch a movie with me. It seemed like a harmless suggestion, right? We exchanged numbers, and while we were texting, she sent the first flirty message. We stayed up all night sexting. I felt like I was dreaming. We met the following night and made out in her car. I couldn't believe how quickly things were escalating, but she admitted how she felt about me for the past few months as well, right down to being attracted to my voice. She went down on me in her car the same night. 2 days later, she booked a hotel, and we did it for the first time. It was incredible. I had never released so hard before. I hit the painting on the wall above the bed. Sorry, anyone who stays in that room. This went on almost one a week for over a year. It was the best time of my life. I experienced significant personal growth. All my regrets and mistakes faded away, and nothing from my past seemed to matter anymore because it led me to her in this life, in this moment. I wish I had met her earlier before she ended up in a difficult marriage, but I understand that's not how life works. I loved her then, and I still do. We parted ways because she needed to prioritize her role as a mother to her son. She wasn't in a position to live freely like I could at that age. I hope she's still getting her needs fulfilled somehow. I can't imagine how much torture it is to be trapped in a loveless marriage. To bring a little humor into this, we eventually saw a movie months into whatever it was we had. The movie was great, but she also gave me head in the theater parking lot before we went in, so I might be biased. Anyway, please don't settle for someone you don't love or doesn't love you back. Story 9. My girlfriend and I went to the zoo with her mom, and during the trip, my girlfriend ended up throwing a bit of a tantrum. It made for an awkward car ride home since her mother was driving. I couldn't even bring myself to talk to her, and when I glanced over, she was giving me a death stare and asked, "Do you want to break up?" I paused for a moment, and her mom mentioned she'd drop her off and take me the rest of the way home. I replied, yeah, I do. After she dropped her daughter off, her mom drove me home. I joked that my plan to get closer to her through her daughter had worked. She laughed and said I'd be lost and wouldn't know what to do with her. I blushed deeply, and she noticed. It took me a few minutes to gather my thoughts and figured, F it, I'm going to flirt. Her mom, since the day I met her, would always wear tighter shirts and hip-hugging jeans around me. She was a recently divorced woman who may have been lonely, who knows? So I made a flirty comment about her looking fitter every time I came over. We returned to my house, and since my parents weren't home, she had joked about taking the day off just to use my pool. So I seized the opportunity and said, "It's a perfect night for a swim." I figured she'd just laugh and tell me to get lost. But to my surprise, she agreed. Suddenly, there I was, in my pool with my now ex-girlfriend's mom. She was her inners, and we were making out. The following weekend, my now ex went to her dad's, and I spent the weekend with her mother. We ended up getting close, and it continued for a few more weeks, but I had to end things when her daughter started to suspect something was going on. I don't regret it, and we both had a lot of fun, and yes, we banged. Wow, all these stories about parents getting involved with their kids' boyfriends/girlfriends feels really off. I can't even picture my parents considering something like that, even if they were divorced. Story 10. His parents had just split up, but she was still staying temporarily while her new boyfriend found an apartment. One Saturday night, we had a bonfire, drank a bit too much, and stayed up late. At around 2 a.m., I was outside smoking alone when she came out. It felt normal since she was a smoker and a night owl. She stood next to me before asking to sit on my lap. I made eye contact with her, and she just started making out with me. I ended up doing her in my friend's bed while he slept on the couch. I vowed to never speak of it again. Story 11. I was high and had been drinking when my friend's mom kissed me. I was drunk on my friend's sofa while everyone else was in bed. Suddenly, my friend's mom came into the room and started to kiss me. I pretended to be asleep, but then my friend walked in and went absolutely wild. Things started getting thrown around, so I left quickly and called a taxi. That person still holds a grudge against me to this day. I figured it was easier for me to be the jerk than for things to get even more complicated for my friend and their mom by me being honest. I'm guessing he didn't see you pretending to be asleep? Because if he did and went nuts on you for being the victim of his mother, then he's crazy. Story 12. I was training for the military, so I spent a lot of time running to prepare for basic training. A few friends in the program decided to join me, and we quickly became good friends through our regular meetups. One day, I went to Tiffany's house to help her move some things as her ship date approached, and that's when I met her mom. From the moment I saw her, I felt an instant attraction, not just to her looks, but to her vibrant personality as well. She was even having a pole installed in her house for exercise, which added to the intrigue. So, being 20 at the time and my body vigorously coursing with testosterone, I thought that was the hottest thing ever. The more time I spent at Tiffany's house, the more I noticed her mom returning my lingering glances. This playful dynamic went on for a couple of weeks, marked by occasional flirtation and subtle advances, until my friend's ship date arrived. To set the stage for what happened next, let me explain the military departure process. The night before you ship out, you're usually put up in a hotel near MEPS, and the following day, you go through processing, swearing in, and then shipping out. Tiffany's mom decided to book a room at the same hotel so she could be there for her daughter in the morning, and she invited me to join them. Naturally, I accepted. We all hung out in her mom's hotel room until Tiffany's curfew came around, forcing her to leave us alone. We had a few drinks in the room, and then we did it. It was the best I have ever had to date. After that night, we hooked up a few more times, but it ended soon after. I don't think Tiffany ever found out, but I'm not sure. I'm 23 now, and haven't really talked to her since. So, the night before her daughter leaves for the military, this woman is focused on hooking up with her daughter's friend? I mean, her priorities are pretty messed up. Story 13. I have a friend whose mom was always really nice and bubbly. We'll call her Jane. She had a few boyfriends during the time I've known her, but none lasted more than a few months, and there were never any talks of engagement. As I grew older, I noticed Jane became friendlier and more touchy-feely. I often dismissed it as my imagination. She would frequently comment on how I was turning into a tall, handsome young man, complimenting my muscles and my new haircut. It became clear that she was paying a lot more attention to me than seemed typical. When I was 19, almost 20, I was working a job with limited hours. Jane, being a single mother, whose son Sam had just left for college, offered me the chance to do some yard work at her house for pay. I was all for it since I could use the extra money. One day, Jane decided it was time to rip up her carpet because she was getting wood floors installed. Who better to tackle the job than me, Melvin Gibson? After about 30 minutes of hard work, I was exhausted and took a break on the couch, which had been pushed next to the kitchen tile. Jane had come home from work about half an hour earlier, taken a shower, and emerged wearing just shorts and a sports bra. She's an attractive, dark-skinned woman in her early middle age and in great shape. I've always found her sexy in a classic way, especially her glorious breasts. As she walked out, she said she would help me finish the job and joked about how attractive I looked as a blue-collar worker. She mentioned how much she appreciated a man who wasn't afraid to work up a sweat. After a minute of playful banter, she sat down on my lap. While it wasn't entirely surprising given our history, I couldn't help but feel the chemistry between us. While she was on my lap, I couldn't help but quickly look at her cleavage that was pressed against me. She noticed this and giggled and playfully scolded me, but went on to say she didn't mind. This is where things got real. She then straddled me and pressed herself right near my face and said, "I'm used to the attention," and asked me if I would like to feel them. This caught me off guard, and I said no, even though I really wanted to. She wouldn't take no for an answer, so I did it. I lightly touched her with one hand, then pulled back. She then said, "Oh, come on, really feel them." I could feel her staring at me. While she did that, she began to stir her hips, and I could hear her breathing pick up a little. I won't go into any more detail, but this quickly turned into me boning Jane. I continued for a while to go to Jane's house to do work, and we did it a few more times after that. We never discussed it, but it was obvious we wouldn't tell anyone of this, especially Sam or my mom. After a while, I got a better job, and Jane became involved with another man. It's as if nothing ever happened, which I honestly prefer. I still see her fairly often, but she's a very cool person, and nothing ever seems awkward or anything of that sort. Overall, it was an awesome experience. Story 14. I was 20 years old when I started sleeping with my, at the time, recent ex-girlfriend's mom. It all started one day when we were hanging out at her house, and she asked if I wanted to ride over to her mother's, my ex-girlfriend's grandmother's house, to feed her dogs, seeing she was out of town. I agreed, so I got in the driver's seat of the Suburban and started heading to her mother's. While on the way, everything seemed normal until she put her hand on my leg. I was caught a little off guard, but we were close, so I didn't really think too much of it. We continued down the road in a void of silence when she slides her hand up to my belt and starts unbuckling it and unbuttoning my pants. Next thing I know, she is out of her seat and on her knees in the floorboard, delivering a pretty fantastic head. It was a Chevy Suburban, so there was ample amount of room. We get to her mom's, and she grabs me and pulls me into her mom's room and pushes me on the bed. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out. As I lay there, I am flooded with the emotions of excitement, horror, guilt, and pleasure. I protest briefly, but by the time I had a chance to put a sentence together, she had already taken me inside of her. We finished up, admittedly, not too long after it began, fed the dogs, and went back to her house, where I smoked a bowl with her daughter. We didn't talk about it for about a week, but it turned into a semi-regular thing for about a year and a half. Eventually, I cut it off because I found a girl that I cared for, and she lost her on me, and we haven't really talked since. Story 15. I was just getting on hookup websites and seeing the vast number of men out there who also like men. I ended up doing my girlfriend's dad. I only told her years later. Bonus story. She was a lesbian. I was gay. Both of us used each other as covers without realizing. Story 16. I banged one of my best friend's moms for about a year. Her husband was cool with it and a bit jealous that she was doing a younger guy, and he wasn't. I'm going to be a bit guarded with details, but she ran a business that involved traveling around parts of the country, and I was employed by her. Because I was out of grad school and an employee, her son never put two and two together. I would travel with her and stay in hotels with her, so it was the perfect cover. I don't really know how it started, but she and I hit it off. She asked me once if I wanted a head or to be made love to. She's the only woman that has ever successfully gave me a head to completion. It was freaking wonderful. Most awkward moment was definitely when she said, "That's where Johnny came from," as I stuck it in her box. It's been almost 20 years now. You know that saying about older women really knowing what they're doing? Totally friggin' true. Many guys banging their friends' moms. At this point, it's best to hide your mom from your guy friends for safety. Story 17. It was a long time ago. I was good friends with a guy from med school. His mom, an attractive nurse who I would guess was in her mid-40s at the time, was also working in the hospital we interned at. All the guys would comment about how good-looking his mom was, and he would do the typical, "I'll kick your A if you look at my mom again" shit. We all looked anyway. She was not a supermodel or anything, but compared to our moms, she was Cindy friggin' Crawford. Anyway, a few of us would sleep over at his house regularly. He had a pool table in the basement, a Nintendo system, and a lot of cool shit, and his mom was really laid back. So she would let us stay up till all hours of the night. I went to his house one day to pick him up to hang out. He was not there, but she invited me in to hang out. It was like 4 in the afternoon. I go in and sit in the kitchen. She tells me that he went out with his girlfriend and he won't be home till later that night. She immediately starts coming on to me, telling me about how handsome I am and that she hoped we'd have some time alone because she has wanted to get me into bed for a long time now. She says that she has not had a man in a long time and that she's so lonely. Yada, yada, yada. I was in my glory, but played it cool. As cool as a guy in his early 20s can play it, I guess. I tried to play hard to get in that I was afraid and unsure if we should do it. She guides me into the living room and sits me down on the couch. I swear, I heard angels singing. We banged for the next few hours until I have to leave. It was amazing, and after it was done, my head was swimming. Next time I saw her was maybe 3 days later. She never gave anyone any clue as to what happened, but when no one was looking, she would shoot me these playful looks and smiles. We banged a few more times, but no one ever found out that I know of. I grew apart from her after we graduated, but I will never forget that time in my life. It was so wrong, but my God, it was amazing. Story 18. I'm still very close with my ex-boyfriend, Matt. We dated for 4 years from our teenage years into our early 20s. We always got along well and split amicably, but our paths just started to diverge. I moved about an hour and a half away while he stayed local. Despite the distance, I remain close to him and his family, and we still get together a couple of times a year for cookouts and gatherings. Although Matt and I see each other more frequently, our relationship is friendly and non-physical. We both turned 28 this year. Matt's parents, Jack and Jane, have always been great to me. They're warm and fun, and their house hosted many of our parties when we were younger. Now, those gatherings feel more like reunions, with parents and friends socializing together rather than just us kids playing beer pong in the basement. 2 summers ago, I visited one of those cookouts, and it was a great time. There were about 20 people there, including Matt, his parents, his younger brother Steve, and some mutual friends from both our generations. As the night went on, while some guests started to leave, a few of us stayed up drinking. I was one of the last to head to bed. Since Steve had gone home, I stayed in the extra bedroom, Steve's old room, rather than risk the long drive back. The next morning, I wasn't feeling my best and slept in quite late. For some reason, both Matt and his mom were out for the day, allowing me to sleep in undisturbed. Jack was still around, so when I finally got up, it was just him and me in the house. Jack is in his late 50s or early 60s, and still very handsome and fit. He's the kind of guy who's always busy, either working in the garage or fixing things around the house. He's really friendly and has always treated me well, but I've sensed that he might be attracted to me too. He often gives me lingering smiles and big hugs, along with compliments about my looks. It's all done openly and never feels creepy or weird, just flirty. I enjoy it, and it seems like harmless fun, so I haven't thought too much about it. That morning, when I finally made my way downstairs looking a bit rough, Jack laughed and playfully teased me about my appearance. I chuckled and smiled back, but I suddenly became aware that it was just the two of us alone, and I started to see him in a different light. He was kind and made me breakfast and coffee, and as we chatted, his flirty demeanor and frequent smiles caught my attention. I found myself feeling unexpectedly attracted to him and responded with some flirtation of my own. It was clear that things were heading in an interesting direction. Before I knew it, Jack came up behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders and starting to give me a massage. He joked that I must be sore from the night before. While he had given me shoulder rubs before in a casual way, this time felt different. With his strong hands on my shoulders and no one else around, I felt a rush of excitement. I smiled and leaned back to encourage him, and his hands moved to the front of my shoulders and the top of my breasts. I was not wearing a bra. I was only wearing a long t-shirt and pajama bottoms. Jack mentioned that if I wanted to shower and freshen up, I could use the master bathroom. The master shower is fantastic. Spacious, tiled, and equipped with glass walls and a dual shower head. He offered to help me get everything ready, and we both headed upstairs. I was feeling bold. As he adjusted the knobs to start the water, I took off my shirt. His reaction when he turned around was great. I said something to the effect of, "You're joining me, right?" And it was on. We came together, started making out, clothes came off, and into the shower we went. We banged, and it was really, really good. We started in the shower, quickly dried off, continued in front of the mirror, moved to the bedroom, and finished on the bed. Afterwards, we both played it off pretty cool. I showered and got dressed. We exchanged some big smiles and a hug, and I went on my way. We hooked up a few times after that. The connection we had was no small matter, and I found myself thinking about him a lot. I wanted more, but I knew we couldn't do it. I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm guessing it was similar because we both cut off communication between the two of us after that. I've seen Jack several times since then in those mixed cookout party settings, and we've always been very casual and comfortable with each other, but we haven't ever resolved where we're at, though I think we pretty much have an unspoken understanding. We do still share those flirty looks and hugs, but now they are a little different with us having made that connection. I can't imagine that Matt, Jane, or Steve have any idea. They've never shown any signs of suspicion, and we've all continued as if nothing has changed. If they ever found out, it would devastate them and ruin my relationships with some of my favorite people. I genuinely believe they will never know. I don't think I'll hook up with Jack again. While we shared a special connection, it developed so quickly that pursuing it further would put his marriage at serious risk. I couldn't do that to Matt, Jane, or Steve. As it stands, I often feel guilty about keeping this from them. Yet at the same time, I also recognize that what happened was a beautiful moment between two consenting adults. In other words, I think this is all in the past. Things are more complicated now. I will always enjoy the memory, but I will always feel guilty that I betrayed a trust. Sometimes I regret it, sometimes I don't. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.